This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is University of Nebraska-Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis with a cattle market update. He discusses a few new risk management products cattle producers might want to consider. K-State Extension swine specialist Joel DeRouchey continues the show by previewing K-State Swine Day. He explains the program for the day and an opportunity for high school students. Drew Ricketts, K-State wildlife specialist, completes today's show with information on what could potentially be causing holes in people's yards. He says there are different attributes to the holes that can help with identifying the species. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update. And this week we're joined with University of Nebraska-Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis. Elliott, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Shelby.
And Elliott, getting our cattle market conversation kicked off with what are futures looking like?
Yeah, so the last week has really been kind of up and down. We were really heading downward on the live cattle market, particularly in the December live futures. But we were able to rally a little bit throughout the week, really peaking on that Wednesday, really around the 188. But since then, we dropped quite a bit, and in fact, almost finishing the week at 186. So we thought we were going to have some movement there, but then we ended up not fully having the full price movement. And those have really been pushed down also into the feeder cattle market. That's also eroded quite a bit when we think about where we're at in middle of September for at least the November contract. We were at 266 a hundredweight. That's on the futures, and we finished really out at the week at 251. We did have a little bit of a rally there, but just to show that there's been quite a bit of back off in the market over the last month, and that's consistent across the live and the feeder cattle market.
And is that consistent from past years, or is that kind of new for this year?
So each path is really different, but I think we've seen that quite a bit of aggression when we thought we were going to have pretty strong prices going into the fall. So I think this took a little bit people by surprise, and I think at least the bulls in the market are looking for, how do we push this forward? What's the market? And I think it really comes down to consumer demand. Where are we at with that? And consumers continue to support higher prices.
What is box beef cutout looking like for that then?
Yeah, so when we talk about where consumers are going to be spending their dollars here in the fall, it really is shifts from more steaks into more ribs. And so when we talk about kind of what's that rib, what's that chuck doing, that tends to be driving about 40 to 45% of all that boxed beef cutout price into the winter months. That choice boxed beef has really been kind of stagnant around the $500 on the rib value. That tends to be the primary driver going into October, November, December. We're still waiting for that rally to occur. If that goes, we should see that rib value go above $600 a hundredweight. That should pull that up. And then the chuck also tends to have a pretty big bump here in November. We have not seen that bump yet. If we were to follow similar seasonal patterns, that bump should put that over 280. That's going to pull up that boxed beef price, and hopefully with futures along with it. So when we see kind of what the futures market is doing, what's boxed beef, some of that hope is that will be passed down to the actual negotiated cash price and pull that back up. We were up a little bit this week, about $1 up on the negotiated cash. So some of that is getting passed through, where if we'll be able to meet higher values than what we've historically seen just remains to be seen.
And Elliott, another thing to think about when we talk about cattle is imports.
Yeah, so when we're talking about imports, we primarily think about our primary trading partners, and that's really driving a lot of our export market. And when we think about those, it's Japan, Canada, South Korea, and more recently China. So when we think about where we're at on kind of our monthly exports, Japan is somewhere in the range of about 55 million pounds. Same thing about South Korea. And the long conversation that we've had really with the phase 1, phase 2 agreements that President Trump put in that have started to expire was, where is China? And China went from almost being a zero trading partner over our 5-year average, went to almost 20 million pounds. 2022, we were averaging about 50 million pounds a month. So they became essentially our number 2, number 3 trading partner pretty much overnight. And so a lot of the concern was that we've been having is how much is that going to be backed off? And really, as we've seen and followed that export data, we're still about 45 million pounds. So comparing that to where we're at, they continue to be our third largest trading partner. So I think that just goes a lot with what U.S. Meat Export Federation does is we believe we have a great product. Once we can get it in there and people start tasting it, we can continue to have market access there. And so when we talk about, where we're at in exports, I think we can continue to have some support there, even though we might have a little bit of weakness in the domestic demand for product.
And so, Elliott, kind of waiting to see what's going to happen there. And something else waiting on is the cattle on feed report. It's coming out next week.
Yeah, so when we're talking about, where is the supply, when we start to have this cattle run, how full are these lots? At least for Nebraska, I think it's fairly representative of where we're at in the northern plains. At least when we're thinking about our cattle on feed inventory, we seem to be a little bit higher going into the fall. Particularly when we're talking about placements, we were, I think we're going to be pretty aggressive on some of where those placements as we've talked with producers. That run has definitely been underway a little bit earlier than we would have thought, placing more aggressively in September than we normally would be. Some of that is because of parts of Nebraska have been pretty hit by severe drought. And so some of those feeder cattle are coming in a little bit early. But these aren't, light feeder cattle that we'd have down in Texas or in the Panhandle. These are generally heavier yearling feeder cattle that are 700 to 900 pound steers and heifers. And so that's generally where we get most of our bulk. And I would anticipate that we're going to be pretty high in those, at least as far as placements. And then when we talk about really where we're at in our split, that's been a big thing that we've been following is where we're at on, our steer to heifer ratio. And that's been much higher here in Nebraska than it's, nationally. Nationally, we're sitting about at 40%. Here in Nebraska, we're sitting about 48%. So that I still anticipate that to be high. How that ends up changing as we come to the December cattle on feed report will really give us an indication of where we're at on as far as heifer retention going into the January USDA cattle inventory report.
And something that producers are probably always thinking about or should have at least in the back of their mind is risk management. And there's recently been some policy around that.
Yeah, so if our producers might not have been aware of the PRF or the pasture range and forage insurance is an annual sign up. And so essentially you insure for future rainfall that will happen during 2024. That has a set deadline. That's a December 1st, 2023 deadline to ensure rainfall in 2024. And so when we talk about, drought conditions and indemnity payoffs, the time to buy that type of insurance is now. And so if you haven't already been approved, there's a lot of people who sell that insurance, and USDA has an agent finder you can go on and use or talk to your extension agent in your local state. They'll be able to provide some insight into that. And if you haven't already been approved by USDA RMA to buy that product, that's a separate application. And so that takes a little bit of time. So the time to start thinking about that is now, even though we're 6-7 weeks out. And the second is that USDA RMA came out with a new product called the wean calf product. This functions more as a yield and revenue insurance product. This is similar to what typical crop insurance is, where you can insure revenue or yield. And so this will go live in January 2024. This is a different product. The AIPs that are out there are starting to be trained on this. And so this will take a little bit of that pressure off of livestock risk protection. Livestock risk protection is really just a price product, protecting price. And so this is a little bit different variation and something that's probably a little bit more familiar. It is only sold in certain states, so you got to make sure that you're in a state that actually sells that. So it's kind of a pilot project right now, just like annual forage was a while ago. So those are two updates. If you're thinking about, I think we all should, finding ways to manage price, yield, revenues, and even margins. There's lots of opportunities out there. USDA RMA has just a handful of those, and so look into that or talk to your local extension agent for further information.
And as we're talking kind of about risk management here, Elliott, you mentioned two products, but there are so many more and not all just for cattle.
Yeah, USDA has a whole suite of products. This ranges from, for cattle, hogs, sheep, and these are products that I said the USDA Risk Management Agency offers. And the reason why we tend to focus on those is because they tend to be a little bit more flexible than using something like futures or options, and because you don't have to meet certain contract requirements. And there tends to be a subsidy, or the government's going to pay a portion of that premium. But, there are other products out there, private products that are not USDA or futures or options. And of course, we have the traditional futures and options through the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which can be used really as a form of price risk protection.
Elliott, as we look at the whole cattle market then, what would you tell to your cattle producers?
Going forward, we need to be very concerned about price risk management. There's a lot of concerns about potentially weakness in the market. We've seen that over the last month. And really, as we talk about higher cattle prices, those higher cattle prices eventually result in higher retail beef and food service products. And so when we talk about looking at the economy at large, how much can we're all consumers, how much are we willing to pay for a steak, for hamburger? And ultimately, there is going to be at least some cap where consumers are saying, we will not pay above this and we're just going to eat something else. And that's going to have downward pressure. We don't know fully where that is because I think we're really in new charted territory with how high these prices have been. But always finding opportunities to have price risk management and put it in places that you think are going to be helpful is always sound business advice.
Elliott, I appreciate you taking the time to join us once again this week and give us a cattle market update.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Shelby.
That was University of Nebraska at Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and an upcoming event from K-State is the KSU Swine Day. And in to talk about this event and what will be happening, we're joined by K-State Swine Extension Specialist Joel DeRouchey. Joel, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So the K-State Swine Day, before we talk about what's happening this year, a quick history lesson on the day.
Yeah, our KSU Swine Day is the longest running swine day in the country across all of our land grants or other universities. We're really proud of the swine program here and not only measured in numbers of research, but the amount of students trained and the amount of producers impacted by our swine program here. We're very fortunate to have a very vibrant swine research, teaching, and extension program at K-State.
K-State swine specialists are a big part of this day. And so as the day gets started on Thursday, November 16th, what does it look like?
Yeah, we get started at 9:15 with some general welcomes and introductions, and to learn a little bit more about our department, Dr. Mike Day, our department head, will kick things off. Then for the rest of the morning, as well as in the early afternoon portion, both swine faculty and graduate students present the information that was generated this last year to help the industry and producers improve their operations and their bottom line. So we will rotate every 15 minutes with different topics, both in the animal science, the feed science, disease area as well, and to provide all that type of information throughout those given sessions. Some of those sessions in particular of interest that we've had really good response from is in formulating nursery diets. We have been doing a lot of work with acidification or reducing the pH of those diets to allow those young pigs to digest the feed better and to get their guts in a better condition during that weaning process that we know is very stressful across any species. We also have a number of trials related to different sow research. We have a number of studies related to different mineral research, looking at how to improve the diet formulation by reducing phosphorus in particular through phytase and other formulation strategies. And then we also have some feed safety work really dealing with mitigation of potential viruses or bacteria in feed, and then also just general feed mill biosecurity as well. And then there's a whole lot of in between. We have just over 40 research reports this year. And so what our goal with those research reports is to break it down to layman's terms for our producers in the industry of how to use all that information that was generated over this last year.
So for those producers, sounds like things for smaller operations, but also then larger operations.
Yes, we balance our industry very well, we think. So we certainly have a number of our Kansas producers that are very loyal, that attend our event and rely on us for updated information. That's both from small producers to some of the largest in the state. We also have a very large out-of-state following where we have a number of production systems, nutritionists, geneticists, and those owners of different production systems really across the country come into our event. Each year we have approximately 350 to 400 attendees, and so we're really honored to have that many people come in, not only from Kansas, which is our core, but from out of state as well.
And someone maybe not from K-State, but an important presenter in this program, Wayne Cast.
Yeah, Wayne has been a long-time nutritionist in the swine industry. He has held a few different roles during his career. Wayne does formulation. He works with us and our students. He actually does nutrition work for some of our Kansas producers. He resides in Missouri, and he would be one of the foremost experts in swine nutrition, not only in the U.S., but really worldwide. Wayne is a tremendous asset, and we're very fortunate for him to talk about lessons from his legacy in the swine industry as he gets closer to retirement. He's going to spend some time talking about the changes and his philosophy of not only what he's seen, but what he sees in the future, not only in the nutrition side, but in the management in the swine industry in general. So we're very fortunate to have Wayne speak as our featured presenter this year in the afternoon.
And something that's getting started in the morning, however, will be going on for most of the day is the trade show.
Yes, we were very fortunate again to have a very large industry group that supports us by bringing in tabletop displays. And so their goal is to expose their company and their newest technologies or information to all those attendees. So this event's hosted at the KSU Alumni Center, and we basically outline that facility with tabletop displays, and that really gets a great connection for our attendees with those that bring that in from our industry.
And teaching, outreach, and research, really important things to K-State Research and Extension, and Swine Day highlights that, especially with the question and answer session.
Yeah, one of the things that we have built in over time is to have plenty of time so as information is presented that people in the audience can ask questions, and we have that direct interaction right there. And so we can get questions answered, and we all recognize that interaction, regardless of whatever event, a lot of people get a lot out of and can be the most meaningful part when we just have that individual conversation. So, yeah, at the end of the day, but also during the day, we certainly encourage that interaction during any of the individual speaking sessions.
And Joel, how does the Swine Day wrap up?
Yeah, so Wayne Cast, as we just talked about, will be our last speaker. In approximately 3:30, the program wraps up for the day. And then we always have our K-State tailgate, which features Call Hall ice cream and also just gives people time to discuss anything from the day and have that fellowship at that point with producers, students, and the industry in general.
And something new and exciting that's happening with K-State Swine Day is there's an opportunity for high school students.
Yeah, for the first time, we are hosting an official student version of KSU Swine Day. It is going to be held in the same location in our KSU Alumni Center, just upstairs in the main boardroom. And what we're doing here is we're providing an opportunity for high school students interested in swine to not only be part of the regular Swine Day program, but we're going to spend specific time with them on more hands-on activities, have speakers talking about the technology, talking about careers, talking about where they can fit into the swine industry long term. They're our next wave of talent, and we want to make sure that they understand all those opportunities and yet experience the KSU Swine Day with the trade show and all the interaction with those that attend that on a yearly basis.
So for the Swine Day that's taking place Thursday, November 16th, where is this taking place?
Yeah, it's held on our K-State campus at the KSU Alumni Center. So right on campus, we host that. And so it's a great environment to have people in. Many of our alumni love to come to that facility and really enjoy coming back on campus. It's conveniently located there on the corner of campus and with parking. So it's very easy to get to. And for anybody that registers, all that information will be provided in terms of location and logistics in that area.
For people who would like to register for this event, where can they do that?
We encourage everybody to go to our website, ksuswine.org, and we highlight the K-State Swine Day. And early registration is due November 8th, and that's just $25. We have a lot of support for this program, so we can get it at a very economical price. After November 8th, it moves to $50 per person. Included with this is the full day of activities and information. We have a wonderful pork lunch, the alcohol hall ice cream at the end of the day, and other materials that support the information that was presented that day.
And for people who may not know if they can make it on November 16th until the day of, are walk-ins welcome?
Absolutely. So we normally have a large portion of walk-ins that day. We recognize everybody's schedules, but certainly we encourage that if they would like to attend, to walk in and sign up the day of the event.
So as we wrap up today's conversation, Joel, who do you recommend take the time to attend this event?
Yeah, we really have a target. Certainly our core is our Kansas swine producers, those swine producers that have been in the industry, both whether that's a long time or whether they're just getting in. There's information for all those crowds. The next layer is really our swine industry, and that encompasses a number of areas, from not only our nutritionists, but from those operating feed mills, those on genetic side that have a nutrition influence, anybody on the equipment side in particular, our pharmaceutical groups, those that just represent the industry in general. And then really the other group is our students. We will have a number of graduate students present. We have a number of students from other universities come in to learn about the information going on here. And then certainly our undergraduate population. We get a number of undergraduates, both from K-State, but from other universities in Kansas that come in and want to learn about swine production and get our information that day. And so it's something we're able to really connect all those groups together in one location.
Joel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about K-State Swine Day.
Thank you for having me on today. And just a reminder, please go to ksuswine.org for all the information on the upcoming K-State Swine Day.
That was Kansas State University Swine Extension Specialist Joel DeRouchey sharing information about Kansas State University's Swine Day that's taking place here in Manhattan, Kansas at the K-State Alumni Center on Thursday, November 16th. Registration for this event is needed, and if done before November 8th, it will be $25, and after that is $50. Walk-ins are welcome day of. You can find out more information about this event and get registered for it by going to ksuswine.org. Again, that is ksuswine.org. I will link it in today's show notes, which, as always, you're able to find on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll be joined for our weekly wildlife segment with K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today. I'm Allie Nippert for Shelby Varner, and we round out our Monday show, as always, with our wildlife segment. Today, we're joined by K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts. Drew, thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Allie.
So today, Drew, you wanted to talk about wildlife damages in yards.
Yeah, so this time of year, I get lots of calls and emails with pictures of torn up grass in yards, and folks are wanting to know what sort of critter has caused this damage, how do I get it to stop, why is it occurring, and those sorts of things. So I thought this was a good time to talk about that.
What is causing the problem in these yards?
Well, right now, I'm seeing a lot of damage caused by skunks and raccoons. And before we get too far into the specific kinds of damage those critters cause, it's important to think about what to look for when we have damage out in a yard so that we can identify the species that's responsible. Typically, the first thing I'm going to think about is how big is the damage? Are we talking about a spot the size of a golf ball? Is this like a 10-foot by 10-foot area that's torn up, or those sorts of things? The next thing I'm going to think about is it a burrow, or is it a place where something has been digging after something? So if it's a burrow, you're not going to be able to see the back end of the hole. You might be able to run a stick down into it or a pencil or that sort of thing. If it's a spot where a critter has been digging after something, then you're going to be able to see the back side of the hole, and it's going to be more of a shallow disturbance in the soil and that sort of thing. Other things that are important to look at are whether it's a very sort of delicate kind of digging, which would indicate that a raccoon or a skunk is responsible. And what I mean by that is that the animal has sort of pulled the turf grass back and maybe even rolled it up, or they've dug around in between roots of grass without tearing the grass roots apart. So you can actually see that there's still intact roots, but the soil's been removed around them. And that's pretty common when we're looking at skunk or raccoon digging. So when we're thinking about these sorts of disturbances in general, if it's sort of the size of a quarter on up to a golf ball, and you can't see the back end of the hole, then that's probably a rodent burrow of some sort. If it's a trough that's been dug out and it is pretty narrow and long and relatively deep, then that might be something that a canid has done. So a dog or a fox or a coyote has been digging. And like I said, right now I'm seeing a lot of damage that's due to raccoons or skunk. If it's skunks, it's usually going to be sort of a V-shaped depression that's an inch or two wide and maybe 3 inches long. And there might be 10 or 20 of those in like a 5 foot by 5 foot area. Or there might be just one or two in a small area like that. And the reason that the skunks and the raccoons are digging in this area is that there are grubs or earthworms or other insects that might be below the ground that they're digging after because they're wanting to eat them.
Drew, you mentioned wildlife rolling up the turf. What is the best way to prevent these damages?
So that's a challenge. The easiest way is exclusion. So if we had some sort of fence, like a chain link fence or a privacy fence that was very tight that the raccoons or the skunks couldn't get into to get into the yard, that's the best way. Now, lots of people don't have that sort of fencing, and that's a longer-term solution. So other recommended ways of prevention are to try and reduce grub abundance in the yard, and so would use an insecticide or something like that. The challenge there is it's hard to get rid of all the grubs or the earthworms, and fairly low abundances of grubs can still result in damage by skunks and raccoons to the yard. The tried and true method to stop it after it's occurred would be to trap those critters and then remove them. And skunk trapping may sound like something that lots of folks might not want to do because they're worried about getting sprayed. My recommendation, if somebody is going to trap a skunk, is that they get what we call a DeRouchey or a no-spray skunk trap, which is a live trap or a cage trap style trap, but it's made out of some sort of opaque plastic material. And so that skunk can be captured. If you're quiet, don't shake the trap around, you can actually pick it up, put it in the back of a truck, and then take that animal somewhere where you can dispatch it if your yard is not in a place where you could do that otherwise.
That was K-State Wildlife Specialist Drew Ricketts. I'm Allie Nippert for Shelby Varner. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we will be back with more for you tomorrow.